I tell my team now when they're going out to talk to new hospitals that, you've got to look at your end goal is you want to make sure that they develop a great program for young people with cancer in their hospital that's very successful, and that way we will help generations of young people with cancer coming through, and so we'll help many.
Welcome to Quiet Leaders, and I'm your host, Patrick D. Peters. I'm here today with Simon Davies, a remarkable human being, leader, mission-driven entrepreneur in many respects, and someone who I greatly admire and have learned so much from over a number of years. My relationship with Simon is really quite wonderful, in part because by working and knowing Simon, it led to me being introduced to my wife, who is Simon's niece. So I am really excited to have Simon here today. He is the definition of a quiet leader, and I think you guys are going to enjoy this conversation. So without further ado, Simon, I'd love to welcome you to the show.
Thank you. It's a big introduction. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So I would love to go back to where you're from. We're going to talk a little bit about your journey from growing up, being born and raised in the United Kingdom, and you've been now in the U.S. for the past 10 years or so. But would love to go back to maybe some of your earliest memories in the United Kingdom.
Sure. Well, I was brought up in a small seaside town on the east coast of England, a place called Felixstowe. It's now famous for being a container port for Europe, and I was pretty ordinary kind of life, In those days, like kids were then, you could spend an awful lot of time outdoors. Your parents didn't take you anywhere. You had to make your own time. And ordinary life, ordinary schooling, nothing remarkable. A bit tough at home. My dad was in the forces, was in both the Second World War and Korea, and he had some really bad experiences, and that resulted in him having some mental health problems and some addiction problems because they gave him medication. Then at those days, they didn't care what they were giving you, so he had some challenges there and some alcohol problems, and that made home life kind of tricky. But he loved us, so we kind of got away with it in the end, because even though he had some bad moments, we knew we were loved, and my mother did an amazing job bringing us up. I got two sisters, and that was it. That's the early bit.
Well, I happen to know that a little bit about your background, but I would love for you to share about the sort of, as you came of age, so to speak, you were what some might describe as being a bit of a hippie. What was that all about?
Well,
and if that's the right label, how would you otherwise
I
respond
guess
to that
was
characterization?
That was the thing when I was growing up, and had I had hair, right down my back. I was, the archetypal hippie, smoking too much dope, doing a little bit of acid. I never got into the hard stuff, actually, but I did trip a little, and went to the music festivals and hung out in with friends in bedrooms in darkened room, listening to crazy music and thinking we were really cool. So that was that certainly probably affected my educational ability for the rest of my life, but it was a good time.
I know it didn't affect you in any kind of negative way. In fact, I think it may have been formative, because you're such a wonderful person. Would love to learn about what that experience of sort of being in the kind of hippie culture was like. What were those, historically significant, let's say, concerts like, when there was a lot of sort of social unrest at the time, I can imagine. But would love to know, like, what it was like to be there sort of in the mix with So many interesting things going on at a time of great change.
You know, it's interesting because I actually obviously indulged myself in those times, had a great time, did some fun, crazy stuff, like going to these festivals where, the toilets were disgusting and, but we all thought it was cool. And in some ways it was insightful, and, taking acid was there were some interesting sort of insights came out of that. But I also think actually that kind of hippie era was a little bit selfish. It was self-indulgent, perhaps not selfish, but self-indulgent. So I sometimes look back with some criticism about that and think, well, we didn't really care much. Well, if you like, we cared about the sort of philosophical things that we thought were important. But I think on a simple level, sometimes we were a bit too self-indulgent. And I look back and think, yeah, I could have been a little bit more generous at times.
What were some of those, as you call them, philosophical things that sort of were attractive to you at the time?
Well, peace was the big thing. So it was all anti-war. That was, I guess that's one of the things I can give it as an example, actually, of how the two sides of it were not, one side was great and the other side was not so. And I can remember that we were really into the peace and the nuclear disarmament and all of that stuff. But I can also remember that we were like overtly critical of anybody that was in a uniform and whatever their experience was. So we were down on them, for that. And I think on reflection, when I look back and I think about what some of those people went through and their own innocence in not really understanding sometimes the bigger picture of what they were fighting for and stuff like that. So there was that kind of that I look back on that balance. But yeah, I've been out on demonstrations. I've been, marching the streets, been hanging out outside, air bases to try and prevent, trucks going in and out with weapons and stuff and all that. And then we had a lot of unrest a bit later on, politically. We had the joys of Margaret Thatcher in the UK, who for me was a demon. And we used to go out and raise money for the miners who were striking, who had no money in their communities, and she and her people were destroying those communities. And so I was collecting food at supermarkets and trying to get people to donate.
Do you think your experience being in a family that was sort of significantly impacted by war and military service impacted not just your own experience, but to the extent you could maybe color in for us whether or not you thought that many of the other so-called hippies at the time also had that kind of home environment because of all the wars that their family may have been involved in?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think mine was peculiar. My father had just really, really bad experiences, horrific stuff. And this affected him mentally, and it destabilized him. And for me, I kind of learned a lot through that, because he wasn't a bad man. He just had some bad behaviors, and he never hit us or, there was no kind of abuse or anything like that, but he could be pretty verbally aggressive at times when he wasn't right. So that was I'm sure there were some other people that were affected like that. I wouldn't say that those home experiences created the hippie experience. I think it was that whole kind of anti-war, Vietnam, Korea, all of those wars that people were trying to fight against, and the John Lennon kind of belief in peace and love, and that's what we all bought into. I wouldn't say that was all born out of crisis, but sure, a lot of people had parents who went through some stuff, and we were all fighting our parents. I mean, that was the other thing. We were fighting our parents for stuff all the time.
How do you mean
for
by
more,
that? How do you mean?
more freedom, freedom against restrictions, growing your hair when you shouldn't do, wearing scruffy clothes, and looking like a hippie when, they came out of an era where you had to look smart and dress up and wear uniforms and do all that stuff. So we were really kind of breaking that mold.
Look, I'd like to go back to maybe your upbringing in your family and ask, you had mentioned that you have two sisters, and then you have your parents, and presumably at some point, and for many points, perhaps you lived together. And just sort of always curious to learn about the family dynamics in terms of your role as the only son in this family, what that was like. Like, how did you kind of show up for your family, or in some cases sort of, run away and be, immerse yourself in the music scene and the other things?
I think I kind of got away with stuff, to be honest with you. My father treated me more specially than my sisters. He had always wanted a boy, I guess, and he was, and my mother was kind of traditional, and I'm sure she put more on my sisters than she did on me. So I was pretty lucky, really. It was, I think my sisters and I, pretty usual family, feuds and stuff. And then, my father was a kind of a spectre in the household. And so he did become somebody that you either avoided, or maybe you got into a confrontation with, or when he was great, you spent good time with him. I can remember some lovely times with him, and then some other times when it was crazy. So we kind of lived our life around him for sure. And we found each of us, sometimes together and sometimes separately, ways of getting through that time and, surviving the difficult times and getting on with the rest.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I actually have a theory that I'd be curious your response to it. I've written a blog post at some point, maybe a couple months ago, about how I think trauma, if it's healed, can lead to like remarkable people. And if many, many, many of my heroes and people that are out there being quiet leaders and on a mission to sort of live a life of purpose and meaning, they seem to all have some significant trauma in their upbringing or some kind of experience. In some cases, it's because of their involvement in the military. In some cases, in many cases, it's conditions outside their control, of course. But how do you respond to that theory?
I think you're probably absolutely right. I think I found the same in many people that I've met in life. But not everybody. But I mean, I think, it's not uncommon for there to be something, that has made people, I don't know, more determined or more of a certain style of the way they are and how they deal with life. I think a lot of what I learned from my experience was to listen and learn for the clues about when things were going right or wrong, and know how to deal with, the times when, you got to keep out of the way, or you got to, not confront, and just kind of being very sensitive to the things that are going on around me. And that really, I think that probably really helped me over the years to come.
I think the characteristic that tends to show up for this type of person, yourself included, is a combination of empathy and emotional intelligence. And I think they're kind of, in some ways, one and the same. But I think that, many of my heroes seem to have exceptionally high levels of emotional intelligence and self-awareness, which is, it's something that evolves over time, because as you kind of come of age and, become your own sort of individualized person, the self-awareness piece really goes a long way to helping us kind of engage and interact and collaborate with others, rather than, pit ourselves against, some kind of someone's different idea or some sort of problem that we're going to be on the opposite sides of. But to have the emotional intelligence to be able to relate, I think is a really special thing that does tend to come from that kind of, challenging experiences in the past.
Sure.
So I'd love for you to orient us in terms of chronology. So in terms of a timeline, let's go back to some period in time that was a major turning point for you.
I think one of the times that was really interesting for me was that I left home. I didn't go to university right away. I left home to get away from home as soon as I could, and wanted to get to a different place. And I went to another city in England called Birmingham, and I just was looking for work, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And I landed this job in a care home, which was not something I had had any intention or thought about doing. I didn't know what I was going to do. And I landed a job in a care home, and which is pretty strange, really. It was for people with like 20 people living together who are adults with a learning disability, very serious learning disability, some of them. And that was the moment, and I didn't know that I wanted to do anything like that. And I just started. I was just like a care assistant, I think I was called, and I just started doing that work. And I just really realized, not only do I like this, but I want to do it, and I want to do it, and it really was just I just landed there, and it really kind of got me interested, and that was the start of my career in the sort of social care trade, as I like to call it. From there it blossomed. Well, I worked at it.
Yeah, no, it sure did, and you sure did as well. I love what you said there about wanting to do it. I think that's something that in my own experience I've always tried to check in with myself to make sure that the thing I'm doing is actually what I want, and if it's not, to sort of make changes. So for you to have that be one of your earliest kind of professional experiences is amazing, and that you were able to kind of take note of that and sort of lean into it. What did you learn from working with those in that sort of care home with 20 adults that have these severe learning disabilities of different sorts? What did you learn from that?
Well, I learned about a very corrupt and terrible system that had incarcerated those people before they came. So this was a new project, and it was the very first in the city, and it was to help get these people out of hospitals, where some of them had been for 50 years or more, incarcerated, really badly treated, abused, and try and give them a better lifestyle. And even then, that model is something we've moved away from now. We don't put people in houses of 20, we bring them to much smaller places. But it was, they taught me a lot, because they taught me a lot about the institutional life that they'd had, and it really made me realize how incarceration shapes people and turns them into something. And then you have to find the individual underneath that in order to interact with them. And the other thing I learned about was about community and what matters. And they had built this place in a part of Birmingham that nobody wanted to live in. It was a part of Birmingham, where they put all of the Indian and Pakistani immigrants that had come to England. They were all living in really bad housing. They'd allowed them to come in. It was really, all around us was sort of poverty, and people that were in a really bad position. And then down the road from us, there was a little shop, and an Indian shopkeeper was there, and above it was a house, and it was the kind of lowest of the low prostitutes who were doing tricks for people who couldn't afford much in the area. And those people really looked after us, in a way that they didn't have anything to give us, but we had these people with disabilities living with us, and we would, take them out, or if somebody had a little bit of independence, we might allow them to go some distance on their own. And that community really cared for us in a way that you'd think, well, that we were dumped in the same place that they were, and yet they had the heart and the soul to make sure that we're okay. And those prostitutes, anybody tried to, anybody tried to bully or be unkind to our people, they looked after them, and the Indian shopkeeper, would give them money that he didn't really have to afford, and other people would get them to, clean their car when they couldn't clean a car. They just made a mess of it. And it was, it taught me a lot about communities and about how, they have a heart and soul which does not require, money, does not require wealth. And I love that.
I appreciate you sharing that, and it sounds really, really quite wonderful, and in some respects unexpected, but at the same time not unexpected. I also want to talk a little bit about a theme that's kind of emerging here, which is, you mentioned giving money to others and to causes, even if you yourself could not afford it, or they could not afford it. So the idea of always wanting to contribute what little you might have, even when the latter part of that comment is very true. And so you're just, on your own, you've moved away from home, you've got this kind of rebellious type of persona, and yet you're extremely compassionate and wanting to engage and help. So like, where did that come from for you?
I think actually it came from my parents. Despite the fact that my dad was a tricky customer in terms of his behavior and sometimes his drunkenness or his depression. He was an incredibly, on form, he was an incredibly warm and loving man. And I can, those were the times that you treasure and that you remember. And my mother was, equally caring and, tried to make sure that we had the best life that we could under the circumstances and spent time with us. So, it's got to come from them. It's got to come from that kernel of caring, even when they're not doing the best job that you would think a parent should do. Well, my mother probably always managed to do well, but my father obviously failed in many times and felt that himself. But I don't forget the times that he was, he was a good dad.
So, if you could help orient us by, let's say, a decade or a time frame that gives us some sense as to how old you were, if you're willing to share, you don't necessarily have to say, but I think getting some sense as to how old you were when you had that experience, and then what came after that. What was the what was the impetus for you saying, I want to kind of now move on to a different mission, a different project, and maybe try something different?
I mean, I worked for a long time, 20 odd years or more, in the learning disability and latterly the mental health field. I had a kind of career trajectory from them. So I spent some time, I did a small teaching certificate in order to teach them. I spent some time working in an education setting then. And then I moved on into management and was working then for the British state, so the social services department that was responsible for those people. And I moved up in management with them, moving around the country. But and then I latterly moved to London, where I still continued with that working with those sorts of people before moving into the field with cancer, which is another move of mine. But there was an important early component of that, which I think has helped me right the way through, was that, in that first year when I was going to that residential facility, I met Geraldine. And Geraldine.
Love Geraldine. She's wonderful.
And she was obviously a huge impact on me throughout, and still is, in terms of what I've been able to achieve and what I've been able to do, and personally as well as professionally.
I would love to talk about your relationship with Geraldine because Geraldine, of course, is as Simon said, his wife, who is just a remarkable, lovely lady. And, I don't blame you at all for, sort of hitching your wagon to Geraldine, because she's a really lovely person that is so warm and gregarious and wise and caring, and also a terrific cook. So every time I go over to your house, including a few days ago, I get spoiled down to the last morsel of any good stuff that she cooks up. So we'd love to learn about that relationship. Like, when did you guys meet, and how did the relationship evolve?
We met in Birmingham, in that city, purely by chance. Some kind of hippie party we were both going to, and we met then, and then we got to be friends, and very shortly an opportunity came up, because I was sleeping on somebody's floor at that time because I didn't have anywhere else to live, and an opportunity came up to house share with 4 people, and she had a friend and I had a friend, and we moved in together to live in that house for a year. Which was great, just as friends, and that all went well, and we had a great time and had plenty of parties and drank too much and smoked too much and did all that stuff. But she was at teacher training college at the time, and then at the end of that year we had to move out, and by that time we'd got to become more than friends, and we didn't really know it until there was a moment in time when we figured, this has got to go somewhere else. And so, we decided that we would get together then, and and that was it really. We're almost 50 years on now. So we lived together for 42 or 3 of those years before we got married. And so it was definitely as far as I'm concerned, a match made in heaven. It's been a beautiful thing.
I can co-sign that. I think your relationship is certainly one of the most special that I've sort of been lucky enough to observe, be a part of, and I admire it. I think it's a model of a healthy, wonderful relationship where you can, you both just get each other in such a terrific way that I think is quite rare. It is rare, and it is extremely special. But I'm sure it was not always sort of without its challenges, or there may have been times where you had to lean heavily on her, for example. And I would love to talk a little bit about maybe some of the challenges that you confronted as you both were sort of trying to get your feet on sturdy ground. You've got this new living situation. You both seem to be quite mission driven, with some overlapping interests in many respects. What were some of the more challenging kind of moments that you think of as having gotten through as it relates to your relationship with Geraldine?
Well, I think an early one was convincing her mum and dad that I wasn't some useless hippie who was gonna waste her daughter's life. But actually, that was fairly short-lived, and had a wonderful, loving relationship with both her parents. But we've always had each other's backs, and I think that is the key that that does give you backbone. It means that it doesn't matter that if everything else goes wrong, you've always got that relationship to fall back on. And we did a lot. We've always shared out right from the beginning, and we've always kind of balanced our career opportunities. Okay, one of us has got to be working while the other one is training, vice versa. We'll work it out. When we've moved to places, it's been decisions that have been taken jointly about, what's the best opportunity for us as a couple to make a decision. So it's never been one person dominating what we do, where we go, how we, where we end up living. It's always been a negotiation and a balance of, what's felt okay for us both. And if it hasn't felt okay, then it's not going to happen. There's no person in the driving seat. Well, Geraldine's in the driver's
Yeah,
seat. But, you know.
let's be honest. We know the answer, or at least I know the answer to that, and rightly so. But what do you admire about Geraldine? I have my own answers to that, but I would just be curious to know, obviously she's a wonderful person, but you know her better than probably anyone on earth. And so what are some of the sort of characteristics that have always stuck out to you about Geraldine?
Well, I mean, you know that she's a very kind of vivacious individual, and she's beautiful, and so, and she's very fashionable, so kind of like she always impresses lots of people around her. But she's got, as you know, a wonderful, warm personality. But beyond that, she's a very, very strong person. She's really somebody that, when the chips are down, I can totally rely on her, and and we have that kind of relationship, and the chips have been down at times, and she's always been there with good advice, good support, and she's just a great character. She's got a great sense of humor, which and lights up rooms, does all the good stuff.
I was going to say the exact same thing. She's the type of person that walks into a room and the room is, all the eyes are on Geraldine, because she's just someone that is a ton of fun and has, as you said, a vivacious sort of energy and disposition. So I appreciate you sharing that. And at the end there, you mentioned sort of the chips being on the table. What do you mean by that?
Well, I've been in situations, say in a working environment, where it's not healthy, it's not felt right for me, it's not, it's pretty toxic, I'm not happy, I don't know what to do next, I don't know how to deal with that. And, I can remember in that particular situation that I have in mind, she's just 100% there for me, and giving me the support that I needed, and encouraging me, and so that was, and that was a really tough time for me personally. Things weren't working the way I wanted them to be, and and that was teaching me some stuff around leadership. That's for sure. It was, and I had to fall back personally on her a lot.
What did you learn then about leadership?
Well, I guess one of the things that I learned there was, don't outstay your welcome. I think that I had done my time at that place, and I was ready to move on. But then I also, there was some toxic people in that organization, and I felt that I had given them more latitude than I should have done, even though I was the chief executive. And so that was something that I felt I should have dealt with sooner than I did. And so it escalated beyond what I should have let it do. Which resulted in me not feeling good about myself during that period of management.
What's been your North Star for the, as you said, you've really dedicated your life to being of service, and we'll talk shortly about your very significant role in the cancer community, in particular the teen cancer community. Where you're now the executive director of Teen Cancer America. And before that, you were the presumably executive director or head of Teen Cancer Trust, which is the UK-based organization that has, with the backing and support and the platform of Peter Townsend and Roger Daltrey, has really been able to do incredible work. And so that partnership with them and with the organization that and you have helped sort of usher in has been, transformative for people's lives, and it's wonderful work. And so I'd love to talk maybe a little bit about that, actually. When did the opportunity to join Teen Cancer Trust emerge, and what was that?
It came out of that period when I was having a bad time. And I was lucky that there was an organization that was looking for somebody who had management experience rather than experience about cancer. I just want to say something, though, over what you're saying about, being driven and wanting to serve. And that is a part of what I'm doing. But I also just want to say that this is a profession for me, and this is a job for me. And it's important for me that I do this job well and professionally, and that actually just, being, the most caring person is not enough to do that. I have to do just as much as anybody has to run any type of business. I am still running a business, and that's kind of the way you see it. I am passionate about helping young people with cancer, as I was passionate about helping people with disabilities, but I am doing a job, and it's a job I enjoy. And if I wasn't enjoying it, I might be thinking about doing something different. It isn't just about being passionate. It's about the fulfillment of doing a job well.
I love that, and I think that's a very helpful sort of perspective or lens through which we can think about your career, because of course I think there's the both and that's something I've learned from improv, which is the perfect career in many ways is the one that you care about, but that also takes care of you in a way, right? Like your needs get met, you feel empowered, but you also feel like you're being rewarded for the hard work and the commitment and the sacrifices that you've made along the way. And so the word you use there, this is a word that's been coming up a lot in conversations recently, which is passion. And I had a friend recently enlighten me about the etymology for the word passion. Are you familiar with the etymology?
Don't think so.
So I'll share it with you if you're open to that. So passion comes from the Greek word pathos, and pathos translates literally to suffer for. So when we throw around the word passion, you're not throwing it around. I know you're not. But of course, our culture does. Like, you want to be passionate. You want to, work for or with something you are deeply passionate about. But I think that word, and when I learned that, and it's just been a few months since I was, someone shared that with me, that it's really sat with me, because I think it's a word that I think about as it relates to this podcast, Quiet Leaders. It's not about. I think I'm not worried, for example, about all the various business attributes of this platform, because it is a passion, and yet I know the business attributes need to make it all work, because you can't be of service with any great scale without the systems, the infrastructure, the team, the resources, and so of course charities are really quite beholden in some way, or they certainly have to collaborate with the resources that they need. They have to get donations, and they have to, in some cases, ask people to volunteer and do things like that to make it all work. So what have you learned then about, managing a charity? And in your case, it's a very mission-driven organization, of course, and the size and scope of it is enormous, especially in the United States, where you're partnering with any number of hospitals that I'd love for you to share with us some information about. But what have you learned from sort of your experience as a leader within that world, and also as a manager?
That it's no different from any other business. If you want to do it really well, it's a business. Our commodity is young people with cancer. We have to do well by them. The people that give us money entrust us with spending it well. And so I have to run a good business in order to make what we're doing as successful as I possibly can. And for me, I don't see it in any other way. And likewise with running an organization, I've got to make that organization run efficiently and effectively. And I try to think of it in that way, So if I was a business, what would I be doing now? I'd be making sure that I invest the money in the right places, that we don't overspend, that we have good forecasting for the future, that we're very clear about our direction, and that we have people that know their jobs and that are doing it professionally. It's not unusual for me to be recruiting people that come from business to charity, because it's easier to teach somebody coming from business, or rather to get them enthusiastic and passionate about what they're doing, but to bring their business skills to the organization, than it is to to teach a charity animal who thinks, you know, that they're there because, you know, they're wonderful and looking after young people with cancer, to be business-like in the way that they're operating. So actually, I'm, you know, we've all got potential for compassion. I know you have. You know, but you could bring a ton of really good skills to an organization like ours. And, you know, give me 48 hours and I'll get you passionate about what we're doing. It doesn't work the other way around if you come with great passion and you don't have skills.
Is that a job offer?
Yeah, why not? Come on down.
Yeah, I know. I love working with everyone in the Teen Cancer America organization. You know, it's been, I'm actually looking forward to running the marathon, which is coming up in next weekend rather, in LA. And it'll be the first time in a few years that I've run it, but just a terrific event that helps, I think, with a purpose, and of course with the contribution of financial resources, and it sort of furthers your mission in a way that we can all have fun and really get together.
Thank you.
Yeah. I wonder then, you know, as you've had all these experiences running quite a few organizations now, with, as I said, significant size and scope, and different stakeholders that, you know, may in some way have competing interests on occasion, where you have donors, you have the cancer patients, you have employees, you have yourself, you have the community and society and the greater many people can be impacted, certainly within a hospital system, when you're trying to kind of convince them to be, you know, buy into a program that is different than maybe what had been done. And so you have all these stakeholders with sort of different lenses. How do you make decisions, or maybe you can even give us some examples of like the kind of North Star or North Stars, as it were, that you look to help you make decisions that are in alignment with, you know, the values of the organization, and perhaps, and almost certainly, your own values?
I mean, I think you've got to be clear about what your goals are and what you want to achieve. You know, when I came to the US for Teen Cancer America, there wasn't any facility anywhere for adolescents and young adults with cancer. None, you know, and I was a Brit who'd got a bit of experience of doing it in the UK and some contacts here, but basically I was a door-to-door salesman going around to hospitals and trying to convince them that this was a good thing to do. And actually in many, I tell my team now when they're going out to talk to new hospitals that, you know, you've got to look at your end goal is you want to make sure that they develop a great program for young people with cancer in their hospital that's very successful, and that way we will help, you know, generations of young people with cancer coming through, and so we'll help many. But along the way will be a ton of obstacles, you know. And I say to them when they first are going to a hospital for the first time and talking to them, your only objective right now is to be in a position where they'll invite you back. You know, don't look for anything else, because if they don't have to do this thing, and they can shut the door on you today, and that you will not get back through it. So you've got to start in a place where you can achieve something. And the first thing you want to do is to build that relationship where they trust you sufficiently that they will invite you back. And then you build from there, and then you work on what they're going to do. And you know, we have a very structured way now of helping hospitals go through the process of developing programs. We give them a ton of help, a ton of support. We give them way more than they would get from a management consultant that they brought in, to get to a point where they can then apply to us for some money. So first of all, we give them free advice and consultation, and then we get them to a point where they're in a good enough place that they can ask us to give them some money. And then if we think they're good enough and they've got leadership support for doing it, then we'll give them hard cash to help deliver it. But it's a process, you know, and you've got to you just never forget the end goal, but be prepared to sort of take the steps that are to get there. I liken it to running. You'll like this. You'll like this. You'll like my running metaphor here, that it is like running a long race. And of course, you know where you've got to go, and you know that you want to get there, but actually what you've got to do along the way is you've got to watch for the cracks in the road and the holes in the road, because those are the things that are going to trip you up and break your leg and stop you from doing it. And you've got to, and that pathway has to be managed, so you don't forget the vision of the winning tape, but actually along the way are all the things that will stop you from getting there. The cramp, how fast you go at the beginning and at the end, and it's the strategy to get there. But watch out, because those are things that will trip you up and will stop you from reaching your goal.
Could you give maybe an example or two about the kinds of cracks you're referring to?
Intransigent doctors, people that don't think what we're doing is important, they don't care. It's not true. They think they're doing a great job the way they're doing it, and they don't want to change the way they're doing it. It'd be unfair to say they don't care. But they actually don't want us to kind of change their life and make it awkward for them, because they've always been doing it this way, so why should they do something different? And you have to work out a way, okay, so what are the things so this guy's important because he actually has the ear of the chief executive or she, and we know that we're not going to get past that person if we try and steamroll it. So how do we bring them closer to us? How do we find out the things that make them tick? How do we find the things that will interest them? Maybe it's a research angle, maybe it's building on something they've already done and extending it in a way that we want them to. So it's all about working with people, and getting close to them and understanding people and listening to people, listening to what it is. What is it that makes this person so difficult? Why? What's going on there? I remember a guy in a really important hospital who didn't want to do what we wanted to do. And he was really anti it, and it was difficult, and I invited him to a meeting. I was really nice to him, and he still didn't seem very nice. But at the end of the day, after we'd shown him a load of videos and stuff and things like that, and I thought, well, we've lost this guy, and I don't know how I'm going to get around to him. He said, look, why don't we go out for something to eat? And we went out for something to eat, which surprised me. I couldn't think what happened. And in the middle of that conversation, he broke down. He broke down because he had worked with a young person who had died, and he felt partly responsible for that, and he didn't want to go through that again. And he didn't want it to. He'd kind of rebuilt his career after that, or that particular incident, and that was what was behind it. It was actually his own fear of getting back into that situation that he'd struggled with. And I was shocked, but it made you realize that you really got to understand people and listen to what they have to say. Listening's a huge part of management.
Yeah. That's one of the biggest lessons I've learned as an executive coach, is the skill of listening and asking questions rather than a more consulting advisory approach, which is give the answer. And so I love that. I actually think it's extremely powerful, because we were talking earlier about the emotional intelligence and empathy. And of course, you can't really have empathy unless you're willing to listen. And I see this in my line of work, especially with entrepreneurs and startups of different sorts. In some cases, in many cases, bigger organizations that may have a kind of culture that does not do as much listening as maybe they could. And if they did, I think the wheels would be greased in many ways, because I think people want to be seen, people want to be heard, and for you to be able to sit with him in that moment and for him to share that, I think presumably led to a much stronger relationship.
Yeah, I mean, at least half of our work was done.
Wow.
Because we then had a guy who gave us an open door, who would have been a blocker,
Yep.
And I could have, gone to leadership and said, can you ignore this guy, or tried to work with others and ignored him, and not being a part of it. But boy, was it a lot easier when we knew that we had him on side.
It certainly helps to have, the buy-in of what, every company has a kind of hierarchy in a way. People report to people. There are, of course, bosses. There are bosses' bosses. There are boards of directors. There are shareholders. And so there's a hierarchy. And of course, as you said, going around people, I think, is usually not a good idea, unless it's truly truly unworkable. But I would love to maybe, for the audience that doesn't know so much about the teen cancer community and the extent of the volume of teens that have this horrific experience of going through cancer in a formative time in their lives, where they may be, between 11 and 19 years old, and they're not children anymore, but they're also not yet adults. And so would love for you to share with us a little bit about the problem as you see it.
Well, we work actually with teens and young adults. So we work with people in the teenage years, but also through to, people in their 20s as well. And the reason that we exist is because the way the health systems have grown up around the world, but America is no exception, is that the pediatric system and the adult system have grown up in silos. And so if you're a 17-year-old and you're going into a pediatric hospital, the average age will be 6. And if you're a 22-year-old and you're going into a hospital, the average age will be 60. Neither of those environments is conducive, so that's one issue. But then neither are the professional teams that are working with you able to give you the right level of expertise. At a clinical level or a social level, there can be challenges in working with this age group. They tend to get rarer cancers. They quite often have cancers that act more aggressively. You sometimes find that you'll have a pediatric cancer that appears in a young adult, so the adult system isn't very used to working with them, or you can have an adult working in an adult cancer appearing in a 16 or 17-year-old, and the pediatric team is less experienced. So what we're trying to do is create programs and facilities that are conducive to giving the best possible support to young people, both from a clinical level, a research level, a social level, and a psychological level. All of those things coming together and creating something which is it's like a difficult business merger. The pediatric world and the adult worlds are very different, and you're like bringing two companies together in a merger and trying to work out how they can work together effectively. And that's what we do. And we've done that now very successfully. We started with nothing 10 years ago. We're working with 60 hospital partners now. Our goal is probably 150 to 200 that we need to develop over the country, but we're in 34 cities, 20 states around the country, and we're growing.
I had never thought of, it's a perfect analog, I think, the business merger idea. And because I spent about 5 years on Wall Street in mergers and acquisitions, I got a good amount of exposure, certainly at the transaction level for those types of situations. But I also know that many mergers do not go well. Some of them do, and they lead to incredible amount of value. But many mergers do not go well. And so there's this old saying about the Wall Street pitch, which is, you're definitely going to get pitched at some point to buy something. And then when it doesn't work, you're going to get pitched on selling it, splitting it off, spinning it off, selling it to someone else. And so that happens. And there's a lot of reasons why. Sometimes it's no longer a core business unit. Sometimes it's, a completely different business model. But many times it's things like culture. It's a completely different culture. I think the culture of any given company tends to be a kind of a sticky thing, and I think a lot of times it emerges from the founders and the early influences, maybe the investors that might have a lot of say in what happens. And so we'd love for you to speak to maybe double click, let's say, on this business merger kind of concept. How do you manage to make that merger successful, or those types of mergers?
Well, you hit the nail on the head, really. It is about cultures. How do you bring cultures together? How do you get the best of both worlds together? How do you get people to come out of their comfort zone and do something a little differently, and how do you get them to work towards a common goal. And that's why we take a very strong consultancy approach to this, that we get involved in the hospital. First of all, we assess their strengths. They do a self-assessment of what they're doing in relation to young people to begin with, and that's a big learning process for many hospitals, because they don't really know until they start to look more closely. And then we have to start to develop a strategic plan. And we don't have an absolute blueprint, because every hospital system and every pair of hospitals who are working together has a different geography, different history, different structure, and you've got to find the model that's going to work most for them. We have a number of sort of pillars of excellence that we believe are what's important to young people, and then it's about, well, how do we find your pathway towards that, and they can start in different places. We allow that to happen. They don't have. There's not like there's 10 steps to it. We have organizations where we actually help them get the low-hanging fruit that makes them feel successful, and then we say, okay, we'll move to this other area of work that needs to be improved, and then trying to make sure that each time they're edging it forward until they get a complete program, and then it's successful, and they know how it works, and it works in their institutions. I mean, that's the most important thing. You can't just stick a new model onto an old one and expect it to work. It has to fit into. You have to build on the cultures that they have and improve them and bring it to where you want it to be with them, very much with them. This is not about us, inflicting, a model that they have to adapt to. This is about how do we achieve all the things that young people should have a right to achieve in your place, in your time, with your people.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, the parallels here with many of the project, my own professional experiences as an entrepreneur, and before that on Wall Street and whatnot, is and now I'm able to kind of leverage those experiences to help other people, along the way as they build whatever it is that they're building. And I think the incidence, let's say, of like burnout and kind of overwhelm is quite high for people like entrepreneurs, but certainly leaders as well. And one of the sort of the tricks or methods that I encourage them to do, it's a really simple thing, is to sort of count their wins, even if they're very, very small. So if you're very burnt out, for example, and you literally just like have no interest in working, can you take a shower? Can you go for a walk? Could you call a friend? Like, those are wins at the end of the day. And the thing is that when I was burnt out after my last project, I had to build back up with the little things, like the really little things. Go for a long walk with the dogs. That to me, that's a win. It's like, you got to count that stuff, because if as you said, the marathon is 26.2 miles away, you got to, not count every step, but certainly give yourself some credit. You're a mile, 13, 16,
sure.
20. And so I think that certainly goes a long way. I was curious, I don't know nearly as much about the hospital system in the United States as you do. And I would love to learn what you've learned actually about the hospital system, to maybe define that question a little bit further. What makes for a good fit and a bad fit organization to partner with?
The problem with the American health system, like many health systems, and I'm not trying to compare it to the UK and say the UK is great, because it's not, but it's kind of like a broken system. It's a conflict model, which is not healthy. So you have insurance companies fighting against hospitals, and hospitals fighting against insurance companies, patients trying to find their way through that as well, that system, and it's not holistic enough, and it's very challenging. But I would say the thing that wins through all the time, despite bad systems, is the right people. Get the right people, they'll find ways of doing good things within bad systems. And if you don't have the right people, then and it means the right leaders as well. You need people that are can find the best ways for keeping those organizations going and doing productive and good things. And I've seen some great leaders in my time, and some people that have let the side down.
Love for you to share, to the extent you want to name some of the folks you've been able to partner with over the years that struck you as particularly remarkable leaders that were, not just a joy to work with, but also, bought into the mission and were able to kind of deliver the goods in terms of, the goal of the project, which I also want you to speak to, and we'll get to that in a moment in terms of how you assess your success. But before we do, would love to learn, are there any one, two, or more leaders that stick out to you as particularly remarkable in that world?
I tend to kind of look at what different people bring to the table, and it's often it's parts of them that I really admire. I have met. I'm not going to name people at the moment, but I can tell you that there are people that I have met, and they're not always the leader. Some of the people that have taught me the most about leadership have not been in leadership positions, and they are people that you can admire for the thing that they do within the organization that makes it special, and then you can learn from them. I've met leaders who have been great visionaries, and have been amazing at kind of innovation, but they're not so great at maintenance of organizations. I've met people that are incredibly intense and hardworking and attention to detail, but then struggle to get beyond that. But they have facets of their leadership style, which I think is remarkable. I'm not a great follower of commercial or industrial lead, or even health leaders, particularly as I know there's plenty of people out there that have been written about, but actually if they've been written about well, you usually find they've got flaws, and that's what's kind of more interesting sometimes than the other aspects of their people. But I tend to try not to worship leaders in any way or shape of life, and I like to look at what are the best aspects of people. And as I say, you don't have to look at leaders to find really good leadership examples. You can find it elsewhere.
Glad you said that. That's going to be a soundbite for this podcast, because that's really the idea behind it, is that the word quiet in front of leader is a very important word, because it doesn't mean the person is actually quiet. It means that they're humble, grounded, caring, committed.
I sometimes use an expression. I don't practice this all the time, but I do sometimes, and that's leading from behind. And that's about how you can achieve more by having other people do the things that need to be done, and really you're pushing them up the hill. You're not pulling them up the hill.
Love that. Yeah, I think the first podcast on this platform was with someone called Tucker Perrin, who has just this remarkable story of waging a 4.5-year campaign to play Division I soccer at UVM.
Yeah.
And
I saw
there was this TV special on it, and we'll link it all up in the show notes or whatnot. But the story I knew was more significant than the soccer thing, and I knew the character thing was front and center for everything that happened in that experience, because you take someone who's kind of a stud in high school, captain of the soccer team, and getting D3 offers to go play soccer, and then aspires to walk on to a D1 program, which is like, that is seriously competitive, especially a top 20 team, which it was, and in some cases top 10. And so he was humbled in the process of not just not being able to walk on the varsity team, but he couldn't walk on the club team or there are two club teams. There's an A and a B, which means there was something like 50 spots that UVM has 12,000 students. So 60 spots that's a lot, but there's still a lot of competition. So in his case, we won't retell it all now because it's its own thing. But one of the things that stood out in that conversation with Tucker was how he referred to the way that he contributed. And it was about what you just said, which is pushing from the bottom up. He knew he would not get a lot of minutes. There were 4.5 years he didn't even get a jersey or a locker. But he said something that's really stuck with me, and I think it's wonderful how he said it. He said, if I'm the 30th guy on the roster, literally the last spot on the pine, as it were, the bench, and I work harder than the 30th guy on the other team that we're going to play on Saturday, we're going to win. Because if I can push 29 to be better, 29 pushes 28, 28 pushes 27, and then the star player is made as good as he, in the case of men's soccer, he could ever be.
Sure.
So that is, to me, that's leadership. That story just came to mind. And I think it's wonderful how you referred to it. Would love to learn just then how, on that point about how you guys at Teen Cancer America assess your success.
Well, we collect a lot of data. So we collect data from hospitals about what they're doing. We have our own data about what we're doing. And we're continually measuring that. And in fact, we're getting even more into the weeds with data to try and get stuff that's interesting, not just about numbers, because we've got a lot of data about numbers and how many thousands of young people we've helped, but also some of the quality data around what matters to them, what matters to their families, and how whether we're achieving that. And we're trying to, those are the ultimate measures for us, obviously, is, outcomes of young people, survival. But we're not the only people that contribute to their treatment, so we can't just claim that because we developed a program there that we're the ones that saved lives, even if we believe we do. There's other people that are playing part of that story. But yeah, we want data that means something, that is actually that we can be proud of and that we can then reflect on to motivate ourselves as much as prove that we're doing a good job.
So I've been in LA for coming up on 10 years, and I've known you almost since day one, pretty much, because the startup that I moved to LA to work for as an executive was already connected to Teen Cancer America by way of a relationship with Roger Daltrey, and we started running the marathon and partnering in different ways. And so you and I have spent a lot of time together, and not least because my wife is your niece, Georgie, who's wonderful and beautiful, and so we have a lot of our discussions will go all over the place, and we'll talk about like innovation, technology, and where the world's going. And so I wanted to maybe have a little bit of that kind of chat now, where we both have been sort of interested, and you've been interested longer than I have in the virtual reality space, in part because, I'd like you to sort of explain why, because I think the teen cancer community is one that may be significantly able to sort of benefit from that kind of technology. But would love to for you to sort of educate us on what the thinking there is and what's the status of that kind of development.
Well, I mean, it attracted me to it from a professional perspective for young people because it's not only its therapeutic value, but also its value in assisting young people during their really dark times of treatment to come out of themselves and be more in control of their environment. If you're in a hospital room for weeks at a time and maybe you're not even able to come out of it because your infection status is so high that you have to be protected, then how can you get beyond that? And I think virtual reality has interesting possibilities, and increasingly so as time goes on, to enable young people to have experiences that are beyond that room. I mean, there may be therapeutic benefits like reducing stress and reducing feelings of melancholy and depression.
Mm-hmm.
But it also has educational value and experiential value that could be really meaningful. And it may well prove to be, if there's the data collected about it, actually making a difference to the treatment pathway and the effects of their ability to deal with their cancers.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful, and I've been super excited of late because I made the kind of impulsive decision to buy the new Apple Vision Pro, and I was so astounded by it, and could sort of because we've been having these kinds of conversations for a while, I immediately thought of its use case in the hospital environment and supporting teens, because I think being able to sort of escape in a way and go have a scuba diving experience, or go to the Egyptian pyramids, or sit in a lecture hall at a university or even a high school or what have you, is so important, because what comes through our eyes matters to how we feel a lot of times. And I think in the case of loneliness and depression and stress and other things, there's probably no easy fix on any of that, but I think it's the combination of maybe some of these types of tools that that really can be supportive. So I'm excited to hear how some of the data maybe comes back that kind of hopefully supports that. I just wanted to hear, just to go back in terms of the programming, what are some of the evidence-based programs that that you administer, or that Teen Cancer America helps situate?
Well, I suppose it's like the data that we're collecting, and whether these programs are starting to deliver what they need to. So take a very simple thing like every young person who is diagnosed with cancer should receive fertility counselling and the opportunity for fertility preservation, because the cancer and the treatment that they have can render themselves infertile, and it's very often something missed, doesn't happen in time. And so, that's a key marker that you want to make sure that's one of the things that we want to see young people supported, and the right professionals supporting them in that situation. Attention to mental health as well as physical health. We want to make sure that people are receiving the right treatment from the right doctors. We want to make sure that they're in the right place. So all of these are kind of markers for us about the success or not of the programs that we're developing.
So looking ahead, we've got just a few more questions here, and then we'll sort of wrap up. But we'd love to know, what is the goal in the sort of intermediate term for you and the organization, and what message would you like to share with, let's say, 1 million people or more?
Well, the goal is, we've still got a long way to go in terms of making this a universal system in the US, and I'd like to see that extended globally. So we're making really good progress. 65 hospitals or whatever it is, in 10 years is great, and we should get another 65 in less time, because we're on a roll and people know us now. So that's really important. There's a really good Irish expression that I really like, and it says, when you come up against a wall that's blocking your way, throw your hat over it, and then figure out how you're going to get your hat. And I really like that, because I think that is where, America was a blank sheet of paper, or was a brick wall for us when we arrived. And, so how are we going to approach this huge, animal of the American health system and try and get some change in there? And so, go get your hat is a good philosophy, because it's like, you can't always see the way past it, but you got to figure a way. If you want your hat back, you got to figure a way of how you're going to get past that. And so I think that for me is like, don't give up on stuff, and you have to have patience for that, but be prepared to have real obstacles in the way. Don't be surprised when obstacles turn up. Welcome them. Welcome an obstacle, because it's going to be another learning opportunity, and you're going to have to find a way of getting around it. And some of the most satisfying things are getting, are achieving something where at first you thought you wouldn't be able to make it, or you couldn't get around that.
Yeah, I really love that, and I know it's absolutely true, not just for entrepreneurship, which is a key sort of segment of my coaching business, but for leadership and for life and career across the board. I think the determination component is necessary, and there's this really kind of prolific and well-regarded investor called Paul Graham. He started Y Combinator, which is a company that produced the likes of Dropbox and Stripe and others, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And there's just been some remarkable companies that have come out of that incubator platform. And so he's seen, every year there's any number of cohorts of entrepreneurs that come in, and he writes these essays about all these things that he's learned. And he basically has one really terrific essay about, at some level, many of the people that are in that world are already smart. So we can probably, the smart thing is kind of table stakes. But he said the other ingredient that's considerably more important is determination. And I think resilience might be the way he describes it. Because you're right. I mean, that's the hero's journey, is like, it's not the up and to the right trajectory that, I think media and maybe even entertainment will sometimes have you think. The truth of the matter is, as a coach, I can say behind the scenes, everyone who's trying to make change runs into walls all the time, and they get broken in the process. But you get strong. It's like, as a kid, I broke my wrist playing soccer. Wrists, I actually broke this one hockey, this one soccer. But and you can imagine when you break a bone very badly, the doctor has to reset it, but then it can heal, and then you grow, and then you get stronger. And I think there's a saying that's a little bit like the hat one in a way, which is that, actually no, it's not like the hat one, but it's sort of adjacent, which is the troublemakers are the best teachers, right? Like, how much have you learned by, for example, that physician who you sat down with, and you would have maybe had certain assumptions about what was the holdup, but then you discovered a whole nother side to the issue, and that probably has extended into how you interact, engage with other doctors, and then you build from there. So that's the story of every entrepreneur, every startup I've been a part of, every startup I've observed or studied. And again, it's not just startups. It's growing up watching my dad build an airport in Connecticut for 35 years. Like, there are ups and downs, and recessions, and 9/11, and the housing boom, and the tech boom of the late 90s. Like, there are so many things that are outside of your control, and so you have to be resilient. It's really non-negotiable if you want to get important things done.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up here, I wanted to just see if there's any. We mentioned the LA Marathon is an upcoming event that I'm actually going to be running, and so I'll be soon uploading situating my landing page for people to be able to donate. So that's a link that we will certainly share. And of course, I'll link up the TCA's own version of that and the rest of the kind of team that is running. But I wanted to know if you'd like to share with the audience any project in particular that you would either like support on, you would like to sort of share so that people can be aware of any given project, and then also how people can get in touch with you.
So, all of our work is important, and I like to consider us a national organization with a local feel. So if what ticks your boxes in terms of support, if you appreciate what we're trying to do for young people with cancer, and you want to support something local, we're likely to have something local for you. And so, don't hesitate to get in touch with us. Or if you want to just help us change the whole American health system, then that's great too. And support us in terms of our national objectives. So, we have some great things going down. We also have, actually, one of the things we've done, because a couple of parents who lost young people wanted to develop this is a really vibrant music education program where we have young people producing their own music. It's called Play It Back. And if anybody wanted to help in that, it's an amazing, extraordinary thing that we've got going now for, we've had over, I think almost 100 participants now in that, and they've, we've produced a vinyl. They've produced music to a high level. We've had great people involved, like Benny Blanco, the producer, who's given us studio time and helped these young people learn more. And so that's a really good project as well. But no, help us in any way. Our website is one route to helping us, teencanceramerica.org. I'll say that again, teencanceramerica.org. You can find information there about us, about donating to us, and you can get in touch with us directly through that website. So, we're based in LA, but we're busy all across America. So if you're interested and you want to know more about what's happening your way, let us know, and we'll find a way of anybody helping us.
I love that.
And it doesn't have to be about dollars. There are many other ways that you can be influential and help us.
I love that.
So thank you.
That's wonderful, and it connects to everything that we've been discussing in this terrific chat. That I think recalibrates how we think about giving and serving, and empowers people to, like, you can make a difference, and the money we raise and the programs that get made as a result of that make a real difference for people's lives. And it's not just the people going through cancer; it's their families, it's their communities, it's their schoolmates. So it's a very, very important project that I know is doing terrific work, and it's just been so great to be able to work with you, and in what small way I've been able to sort of contribute to the project in the past. I think it's just been so inspiring to see, and that's why I consider you to be a quiet leader.
Thank you. I will carry on quietly.
Terrific. Thank you, Simon.
All right, thanks.